Good morning. I'd like to call to order this joint public hearing with the Committees on Housing and Transportation. It's Tuesday, March 11th at 9:01 a.m. and we're in conference room 830. We have one item on the agenda today, SB 1669 SD2. We'll go straight into the testimony. Vice Chair for the testimony.
We have AG's office on Zoom. Oh, in person.
Good morning, Deputy Attorney General Megan Oka. We support this bill with the amendments recommended in our written testimony, available for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hawaii State Energy Office in support, in person. Thank you. Department of Budget and Finance with comments. Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission in support. State Office of Planning and Sustainable Development with comments. Thank you. OMPO in support. AIA State Council in support. Hawaii Bicycling League in support. Church of the Crossroads in support. Trees for Honolulu's Future in support. Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice in support. Stanford Car Development in support. And 3 individuals in support. Angela Young on Zoom in support.
Yes, hello?
Hi, go ahead,
Can you
please.
hear me? Okay. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES in support of the plan. And so the action items are thoughtful and yet I think it could be more considerate of the land use ordinance and the sustainable communities plan from the Honolulu County. So if you refer to what I submitted in my testimony, I have a link to these resources, which I think would be helpful to planning in the PDF graphic, because the council uses the plans to guide development and to plan for urban infrastructure, especially with high density development, which is to be considered for, especially if there's going to be the Aloha Stadium, TOD district, that's going to require a lot of planning, and also work with the county's office with DPP and also the infrastructure offices such as Board of Water Supply and sewer. And so, for example, the board of directors, I think, could use some work to be inclusive of the county's office by listing DPP. And also, so these are just comments because, I don't work for the city or the state, just a member of the public and a happy advocate. So I think the first step is really to start by talking and having a discussion with people at the county's office and other offices who put in the work to see what's working, what's not. And yeah, before the coordination of allocating resources, getting funds, or even planning and building infrastructure.
Angela, please summarize.
Is to get every player invested in the process to communicate the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Anyone else online or in person wishing to testify on this matter before us? Seeing none, Chair.
Members, have any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll have a brief recess. All right, calling the joint committee hearing with the Committees on Housing and Transportation back to order for decision-making on SB 1669 SD2. I recommend that we move this out with an HD1 with tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We'll add the language from the AG's testimony relating to grant standards. We'll rename the community improvement. I recommend that we rename the community improvement revolving fund to the community improvement special fund and change references to it throughout the bill. We'll recommend that we clarify that the revolving fund is established in the state treasury. And on page 44, recommend that we require the partnership to coordinate with all relevant state permitting and regulatory agencies and programs. All of those amendments above were brought up in testimony by the Attorney General, so thank you for that language. And then I recommend that we amend the bill to adopt amendments proposed by AIA to broaden the urban planning position on the Board of Directors to include a licensed architect and to broaden the full-time planner position to include the possibility of a licensed architect also. And then I recommend that we amend it on page 13, line 6, to specify that 20% of parking stalls shall be EV ready, and delete the reference to 225P-8. And then on page 19, line 1, I recommend that we change the A to a 2. And then in the committee report, we'll reference that the cost for this will be $150,000 to fund the program in section 3 and $400,000 to fund 4 positions in section 4. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1669 SD2, the recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cochran is excused. Representative Grandinetti.
Aye.
Representative Keela.
Aye.
Representative Kitagawa.
Aye.
Representative Lachika is excused. Representative Moraoka. Representative Perrick is excused. Chair, the recommendation is adopted.
Great. Thank you all. Seeing no further business, this joint public. Ooh. Well, we're joining this separate agenda, right?
Are we on the joint?
Yeah, separate agenda.
So I gotta make the same recommendation.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. It is early. Yes, please. Thank you. Good job.
Okay, Transportation Committee members, same recommendation. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1669 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cochran excused. Representative Evslin.
Aye.
Representative Kitagawa.
Aye.
Representative Lachika excused. Representative Miyake.
Aye.
Representative Muraoka. Representative Perrick excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Chair Evans for the adjournment.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chair Keela, for saving this bill. Seeing no further business, this joint public hearing is now adjourned.
Morning, convening the House Committee on Transportation today, March 11th, 9 a.m. Agenda in conference room 430 here in Hawaii State Capitol. Just welcome back to now we're doing crossover. Just a few things in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. In the case that we need to institute a time limit, there'll be a 2-minute time limit per testifier. Because morning hearings have to adjourn prior to our floor session if testifiers don't have the opportunity to testify. In that event, please note that we've all reviewed your written testimony. For those on Zoom, please, I ask that you keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with tech staff only, and please only utilize that for technical issues. If you're disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting, and if discontinued while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. We are not responsible for any bad internet connections. In the event of a network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or make for decision-making as well. In that case, please note appropriate notice will be posted. Please do not use any trademark or copyrighted images as it will affect the documenting on YouTube. And please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior are grounds for removal. We haven't had to do that yet. So with all that to be said, thank you so much for being here this morning. We'll get started with our first agenda item on SB 1402, SD1, relating to vessels in state commercial harbors, clarifies that requirements for securing of mooring lines in state commercial harbors shall not apply to certain vessels. Vice Chair for the testimony.
General Contractors Association of Hawaii in support. Hawaii Longline Association in support. Holo Holo Charters in opposition on Zoom. Oh, okay. Frank Schultz, individual in opposition. Oh, there we go. Holo Holo Charters?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. I just wanted to oppose the bill as it's written. It does mention language protecting fishing vessels from the collective bargaining requirement, and it doesn't mention tourboat operators. There are some tourboat operators that operate out of commercial harbors, and whether it's gross tonnage in the amended language or just mentioning tourboat operators, I would like to see the language more specific.
Thank you. Frank Schultz, individual in opposition. And is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify? Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, move on to our next agenda item, which is SB 1473, relating to Central Services Assessments, amends the transfer of funds for Central Service expenses from the State Highway Fund, Airport Revenue Fund, and Harbor Special Fund by limiting the deduction to 2.5% of all receipts and deposits in the fund, or up to a certain amount, whichever is less, and creates a process to deduct additional amounts based on Consumer Price Index. Vice Chair for the testimony.
Department of Transportation in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, that's different point duty in support.
Thank you.
Department of Budget and Finance offering comments. And Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Okay. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, move on to the next agenda item. SB 321, relating to transportation, provides that fee simple absolute title of a privately owned highway, road, alley, street, way, lane, bikeway, bridge, or trail is deemed transferred to adjacent property owners of the community association if certain conditions are met. Vice Chair for the testimony.
Ted Reimer, individual in opposition. Michael Honda, individual in support. Patty Pinto, individual in support. And Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, move on to the next agenda item, SB 419, relating to insurance. Requires each motor vehicle insurance policy to cover the replacement cost of a child passenger restraint system damage or that was in the use by a child during a motor vehicle accident for which liability coverage under the policy is applicable. Vice Chair for the testimony.
Keiki Injury Prevention Coalition in support. Karen Tessier, individual in support, and Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, move on to the next agenda item, SB 1009, SD2, relating to parking. Establishes a state reserve parking space enforcement fine for parking in parking spaces reserved for persons with disabilities or electric vehicles. Increases the fines for any person who parks in a non-electric vehicle space designated and marked as reserved for electric vehicles, and requires a state reserved parking space enforcement fine be deposited into Safe Routes to School Program Special Fund. Vice Chair for testimony.
Department of Budget and Finance offering comments. Department of Accounting and General Services offering comments on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. We stand by the written testimony submitted by the Comptroller and available to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Ulupono Initiative in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Michael Munikata here on behalf of Ulupono Initiative. We'd like to send in our written testimony in strong support of this measure. Our support is around the Safe Routes to School portion of this bill and finding some type of revenue source that will go and be dedicated to a lot of our much-needed community projects that exist out there. From a lot of our research and a lot of the work that's been done closely working with DOT and others, there's roughly $10 million in infrastructure needs in any given year, and that's at least. There's over $800 million in needs across the state. Over 80% of our state is within 1 mile of a school, so any kind of project that we can do that will make our streets safer for our keiki will definitely benefit our communities as a whole. So really appreciate you folks moving this measure forward and really hope that we can get more support for this particular program. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Retail Merchants of Hawaii in support on Zoom.
Aloha and good morning. I'm Tina Yamaki with the Retail Merchants of Hawaii, and I appreciate this opportunity to testify. We support the intent of this bill. I mean, every day we see people parking in ADA parking spots and EV parking stalls that don't belong there. And then as a result, those who are entitled to park there can't. And so we're always getting asked to expand parking stalls, and it is expensive. Our concern mainly is regarding the allocation of the fine revenues to the state Safe Routes to School program. We all want to see safe routes for our schools, but we don't see the correlation with these types of parking and having to, I guess, fund the safe school routes to school. I'll be around for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you. Hawaiian Electric in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, we do support this bill, but we do propose an amendment where the revenue collected from the fines for non-EVs parked in EV spaces be allocated to the EV charging system sub-account, which is administered by the Public Utilities Commission. And the reason for this is we think this is a way to shore up funding for EV charging infrastructure expansion, especially at a time when a lot of federal funding has kind of dried up. Any questions?
Thank you.
Climate Protectors Hawaii in support. Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice offering comments.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Abby Seitz, testifying on behalf of Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, providing comments on this measure. We're excited to see different bills this session, considering ways to fund the Safe Routes to School program. It's an important fund to help build pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure in Hawaii, and is shared earlier by Ulupono that there's a very big need for that. This bill is, I think, interesting in that it has kind of dual-pronged purposes of also addressing misuse of parking spaces, which is also very important. We do have some concerns around the structure of the fines. We believe that the fines are fairly steep as currently proposed, and we do have just concerns about the potential impact for low-income residents in terms of, cycles of debt and damaged credit as well as court records. But we thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you.
Kauai Climate Action Coalition in support. Michael Arakaki, individual in support on Zoom. Banner Fanene, individual in support. Noel Morin, individual in support. Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Hi, good morning, Chair Keela and committee members. My name is Brian Mick. I'm here on behalf of the Disability and Communication Access Board and Executive Director Kirby Shaw. We are in support of this bill. We do get a lot of the complaints when people see violations of accessible parking spaces. We are not an enforcement agency. That is the county police primarily. But anything we think that will help deter abuse from occurring in the first place, we support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any questions? Rep. Chica.
Is Dags available? Is Keith available? Was he online? Was Comptroller available? Did he testify? Was Dags?
Department of, oh, there we go.
Yes.
Oh, hi.
I'm available.
Hi, Comptroller. Question for if
Sorry. This is Mike Arakaki.
Sorry, we are in the question part now.
no.
Wait, Michael, okay, Michael, you're on behalf of
With
DAGS?
DAGS.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay,
Rep. Chica.
perfect. So if it's an EV designated parking stall, but if the EV charging station is currently unavailable, is not working. So some of them, they're covered. They're, with some of the parking spaces, it's, in a commercial lot, it's not currently working. Can the consumer then be able to utilize the parking stall and not be not be considered in violation should this bill pass? Because it would be a stall then that could be an underutilized stall. Would that, right? Because, correct. How would you be interpreting that? Would you consider it a violation if this bill were to pass and the EV charging unit is currently unavailable for use? Would it still be an unutilized stall? Would people not be able to use the unit then? I mean, the stall?
We would have no objections to them using the stall since the EV charger is inoperable.
So okay. You would allow the public to still use the stall, then it would not be enforced?
Sure, it would not be enforced.
Okay, that's just my question, so that, it would not. Okay, thank you.
And Michael, while you're still on, I need to follow the line of questioning from Rep. Chica. In the case that you folks are then issuing a citation, would you folks then offer that discernment based on the reality that the EV stall is not operable? Then the fine would not be constitute the fine?
Excuse me, could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
In regards to Rep. Chica's questioning, in the case that the EV stall is not operable, are you folks then able to exercise the discernment to not issue the ticket?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, move on to the next agenda item, SB 1120, relating to transportation, requires the Department of Transportation to adopt rules governing a clean fuel standard for alternative fuels in the state. Vice Chair for the testimony.
Department of Transportation in support.
Chair, Vice Chair members, Ed Sniffen, Hawaii DOT. We support the intent. We definitely talk about the importance of GHG emissions reductions or the clean fuels for our reduction plan as we move forward to 2045 clean energy goals. We are asking for this implementation date to be pushed back 1 year to make sure that we have the time frame to set things up. But also, what I didn't include in my testimony and what I've included in the past, I'm still concerned about what that economic impact is going to be. We have no idea what's going to be. When we talk about it, when we ask about it, we just hear in other states it didn't have an impact. But we don't have a Hawaii-specific study. So what I'm asking the committee to consider is that in that first year, the DOT move forward with an independent study that we work with UH on to ensure that we understand what the economic impact will be with a report that's due to the legislature before next legislative session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in support. Nesty in support.
Thank you.
Biotechnology Innovation Organization in support. Growth Energy offering comments. PAR Hawaii offering comments. 12BC in support. Amazon in support on Zoom.
Thank you.
Hawaiian Electric offering comments on Zoom. Okay. Coalition Earth in support. Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, Jacob Aki, we stand on our written comments, but we do support the recommendation from DOT to have a feasibility study.
Thank you.
Fair Wind Incorporated in support. Island Energy Services in support. B.A. McClintock individual in support. Tim Reimer individual in opposition. Frank Schultz individual in opposition. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Seeing none, thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any questions? Rep. Miyake.
Question for Neste. Morning, Alicia.
Morning.
So many of those that live in rural communities depend heavily on like traditional fuel powered vehicles. How do we ensure that this policy like doesn't unintentionally burden them without incentives, feasible incentives to offset the costs?
That's a good question. So we've talked a lot about that, and so leaving the rulemaking in the hands of Department of Transportation would allow them guardrails. So if there were unintended impacts, they would always be able to go back and adjust rulemaking to make adjustments to fix whatever is happening that is unintended, yes.
Okay. So with the economic impact, that's for rural communities. What about like the lower income families that cannot afford electric vehicles or clean fuel?
Yeah, so usually what it does is it invites, it's a tech neutral policy, so it's not just for electrification. So these clean fuel standards have been successful in attracting all kinds of different lower emission fuels, and they use the credits that they are able to receive to buy down the cost of the production, and that usually helps with like the mitigating the higher cost of making those fuels. So this is, I know it's not just for electrification. So like a lot of those bigger vehicles that they use for like rural communities and for like agriculture and things like that, they're not really feasible for electrification at the moment, but there are other alternative fuels that are less they have less emissions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay. Moving on to the next measure before us, SB 21, relating to water carriers, authorizes the Public Utilities Commission to establish a water carrier inflationary cost index automatic adjustment mechanism to address, among other things, inflation and regulatory lag. Authorizes the the Public Utilities Commission to grant exemptions to any water carriers from any requirement under the Hawaii Water Carrier Act. Defines automatic adjustment mechanism. Vice Chair for testimony.
Department of Transportation in support.
Thank you.
DCCA offering comments. Hawaii Department of Agriculture offering comments.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Matthew Loke, on behalf of the chairperson. The department will stand on its written testimony comments.
Thank you.
Public Utilities Commission with comments.
Aloha, good morning, Chair Keela, Vice Chair Grandinetti, and members of the House Committee on Transportation. My name is Andrew Okabe. I'm a utility analyst for the Public Utilities Commission. I'm here on behalf of the Commission. I stand on the Commission's written testimony offering comment on SB 21 SD2 and available for any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chamber of Commerce Hawaii in support. Lanai Oil Company in support. Young Brothers in support.
Morning, Chris Nakagawa on behalf of Young Brothers. We stand on this testimony in strong support. Just want to remind, this is, as the commission has noted too, that this legislation is consistent with the SR 125 working group that was done in 2021. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Hawaii Harbor's Users Group in support. Frank Schultz, individual, in opposition. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify on SB 21?
Seeing none, thank you, Vice Chair. Members, questions? All right, seeing none, move on to the next measure before us, SB 1117, relating to transportation. Give me a minute. Renames the electric bicycle and electric moped rebate program to electric mobility rebate program. Expands eligibility and amends the maximum rebate amounts, prohibits individuals under 15 years of age from riding electric bicycles, amends the age requirement from helmet use from 16 to 18 years of age, allows use of electric bicycles on public sidewalks subject to certain conditions, establishes rules for electric bicycle operation, defines electric motorcycle, prohibits individuals under 18 years of age from operating an electric motorcycle or motor-driven cycle, requires that electric motorcycle operator carriers issue an insurance policy by incorporating electric motorcycles into the insurance law governing motorcycles and motor scooters, including with respect to provisions concerning a required licensure, the relationship with tort law, proof of insurance card, penalties, rate regulation, minimum coverage levels, and makes conforming amendments, changes the term motor scooter to motor-driven vehicle, requires annual reports to the legislature, appropriates funds. Vice Chair for testimony.
Department of Transportation in support.
Thank you.
Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience in support. Department of Transportation Services in support. Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in support. Hawaii Bicycling League in support. Keiki Injury Prevention Coalition in support. The Kapiolani Medical Center for Women and Children Level 3 Pediatric Trauma Center in support on Zoom. Okay. Kapiolani Medical Center.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Lowe. I'm the Trauma Program Manager at the Kapiolani Medical Center for Women and Children. We are the state's only designated pediatric trauma center, and we are seeing a significant increase in pediatric injuries resulting from e-bikes. E-bikes are a new and trending injury mechanism that we have not seen at our center prior to 2021. But between 2022 and 2023, the number of children being treated at our center for e-bike injuries have more than doubled. And in the second quarter of 2024, this was our second most common cause of injuries in the pediatric population treated at our trauma center. And the severity of these preventable injuries is devastating, including permanent lifelong disability, as well as brain death in children. If you can imagine 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds who are perfectly healthy and fully functioning prior to an injury resulting from e-bikes, and now having to break the news to the family that their child will never walk again or never speak as they did before, or having to break the news that their child, even though, you know, they're hooked up to the ventilator and different machines, that their brain is actually brain dead, they're gone, they're dead. We deal with the ramifications of this and the aftermath of e-bike injuries day in and day out at our center. So we are in support of this bill. Please pass this bill to keep children off of these e-bikes, which essentially are motorcycles, as the name in itself is misleading to call it a bicycle. They go much faster than a standard bicycle, and children that young just do not have the cognitive skills to be able to make driving decisions as adults can. We ask that you please pass this bill to mandate helmets for those who do operate these electric motorcycles, and to please please prevent these unnecessary injuries and brain death in the children of Hawaii. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice in support.
Aloha again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Abby Seitz with Hawaii Appleseed. We stand in strong support of this bill as e-bike rebate programs, both here and across the country, have been found to be effective ways to reduce household transportation costs and also lower vehicle emissions. We do provide a number of suggested amendments around increasing the rebate amount, particularly for folks who are seeking adaptive bikes, as well as including a point of sale component to the program. So thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Ulupono Initiative in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Michael Munikata here on behalf of Ulupono Initiative. In strong support of this measure, I'd just like to first thank you, Chair, for your leadership in moving this bill forward, both the House version and this one. I think it's a very important measure to create a very safe, responsible program that's much needed for our communities. I think as stated in previous testimony, this is an alternative means of transportation. If they're not in an e-bike, they're driving a car. I think we've all seen what can come about when people are in cars too. I mean, there are some realities there as well. Not saying that it's the same, but there are some realities that exist there. We're trying to get people to consider different alternative options. What are their choices they might have? There might be a cheaper option that might be there, and this program actually creates a lot of options for those that don't have an option initially. So we really appreciate the expansion of this program. We do have a couple of recommendations in our testimony, but really, again, thank you for moving this measure forward.
Thank you.
We have Kimberly Webster, individual with comments. Kyle Kolomona Nakatsuka, individual with comments on Zoom.
Aloha to the committee. Thank you very much for hearing this bill, and thank you a lot for all of your hard work on House Bill 958, the companion. I think you guys are the committee that understands this issue the best. And I also appreciate that in the amendments in this bill did include the tort liability abolition kind of repeal that I mentioned in my testimony. I wanted to bring up another issue that I didn't mention in my testimony, and that is that a lot of the Class 2 and 3, so Class 2 and 3 e-bikes or Class 3 e-bikes are limited to 750 watts, but a lot of them, in spite of that, also have a peak power. So their nominal power is 750 watts, but they have a peak power that briefly will go over 750 watts. So that's for like a moment right when you're just starting to pedal. So these are normal bikes that, they'll only operate when you pedal for Class 2 e-bikes. My boss rides one of them to work every day. They're limited to 28 miles an hour. But because of that peak power that briefly goes over 750 watts, they would be included under this definition of the definitions in this bill. They would be included as electric motorcycles, and that would, apply the other electric motorcycle laws unintentionally. I think it's not the intention of the original writers of the bill or your intention to exclude these pedal assist e-bikes. So it's kind of a complicated issue. It's a bit hard to describe. And let me emphasize who it might affect. I said that my boss rides to work every day on a pedal assist bike. Rep. Pierre, I encourage you to ask you and look at your bikes, have your staff look at their bikes. I suspect that you might have some e-bikes that might be included with this. So given the 750 watt limit, if it's stated directly like that, then it may exclude bikes that have a peak power over 750 watts. It might be, so my boss's bike, I said his has peak power of 1,000 watts. If it'll hold it briefly. If it goes any longer, it'll burn out the motor. It's kind of difficult to address this in the bill. Two ways to do it might just be to push the e-bike, the watt limit up to 1,000 watts, 1,200 watts, and this still distinguishes it from the electric motorcycles that are often like 5,000 watts or something like that. It is another way to address this issue is simply to just remove the watt limit completely, because the 28 mile per hour limit is essentially sufficient, I think, to distinguish these bikes from the bikes that will go 0 to 30 in 2 seconds. the real, electric motorcycles that you see kids doing wheelies on. So it's a complicated issue. I ask that you look into it and adopt either of those two solutions. Look closely into, it'll take a lot of research, but to understand the issue, to understand what exactly the difference is between nominal or peak power. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Thank you. Members, any questions? I want to note that Rep. Pirrick is not here, and I'm not sure if you're referring to me as Rep. Pirrick.
Oh, no, that's it.
Hi, sorry, I didn't realize that. I was referring to him. Yeah, his staff already, but
It's okay. Moving forward, the next agenda item, SB 1008, related to parking, authorizes the counties to adopt ordinances to enforce accessible parking spaces requirements for parking. Authorizes the counties to adopt ordinances to enforce accessible parking space requirements for parking spaces reserved for persons with disabilities and electric vehicles. Vice Chair for testimony.
Retail Merchants of Hawaii in opposition on Zoom. Okay, not present. Climate Protectors Hawaii in support. Hawaii Climate Action Coalition in support. Chair Alice L. Lee, individual in support. Banner Fanene, individual in support. And 3 other individuals in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who would like to testify?
Sorry, once again, good morning, Chair Keela and committee members. I'm Brian Mick here on behalf of DCAB and Executive Director Kirby Shaw. We are in strong support of this bill. Just wanted to reiterate, it does not impose any obligations, financial or otherwise, on the state. It's simply giving the counties the ability to adopt ordinances relating to the design of accessible parking spaces. It clarifies who from the county could enforce those ordinances, and it clarifies for the electric vehicle charging spaces, which are already required under HRS, it clarifies who from the county can enforce those ordinances. If this bill were to pass, DCAB will still need to work with the counties that are willing to adopt ordinances which reflect ADA regulations. The Retail Merchants Association did submit testimony in opposition, but in reviewing that, it seemed to reflect a misunderstanding of both this bill and of existing law, so I just quickly wanted to address it. It says they do not support requiring EV charging spaces for existing businesses. However, that is already required under HRS 291-71. HRS 291-73 already gives the counties the ability to adopt design ordinances for EV spaces. Again, the bill simply clarifies who can enforce those. The RMA also mentions the ADA design regulations for accessible parking spaces. Everything in their paragraph is correct, but the problem is that the DOJ does not have the resources to enforce design requirements when it comes to parking, unless it's involved in a really large development such as a large apartment building or at a large shopping center. So really this bill is seeking to move the enforcement from the federal level to the local level where it can actually happen. However, if the committee does have qualms about the EV section of the bill, we would urge you to just delete Section 3, but to please keep Section 2 intact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify? Oh, Retail Merchants of Hawaii on Zoom.
Aloha, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties there. Hi, this is Tina Yamaki with the Retail Merchants of Hawaii, and we are in opposition of this bill. It just makes it harder when there's different rules in different counties. It's easier when it's state mandated on things. And we want to point out that, especially on the neighbor islands, the need for charging stations is a lot less, as many have EV vehicles have charging stations at their home, unlike in Honolulu, where that is not the case. And also to, retailers and shopping centers shouldn't be the ones who are doing all of the EV charging for all of these cars. As we all know, electricity is going up too, and what we're seeing is a lot of people coming out to get free charging just so their electric bill doesn't go out. And we try to do this as, part of the customer service, but these guys are not really shopping in our stores. I'll be around for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other testifiers on SB 1008?
Seeing none, members, any questions? All right, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 97, relating to motor vehicles, increases the penalty for a third or subsequent offense of excessive speeding to a Class C felony, authorizes the court as part of the person sentencing for third or subsequent offenses to order that the vehicle used by the person in the commission of the offense be subject to forfeiture, requires a repeat offender convicted of a Class C felony for excessive speeding to be subject to identification processing, including fingerprinting and photographing. Vice Chair for testimony.
Office of the Public Defender in opposition.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Haley Chang. I am the first deputy at the Office of the Public Defender. I believe I've testified before you on this bill, and I do just want to highlight again the key points and why we are in such strong opposition. Our opposition is not because there is a lack of recognition of the significance that speed and dangerous driving behavior can cause. However, as I think I've testified previously, this is going to raise what is now a petty misdemeanor offense to a Class C felony. Other Class C felonies are sexual assault in the third degree, drug possession, burglary second, terroristic threatening in the first degree, assault second, and the penalty suggested by this bill is actually more severe than all of those charges because all of those charges that I've just articulated are probation eligible. This bill mandates a 5-year open term of incarceration. It also, by escalating it from a petty misdemeanor to a felony, will make these offenses eligible for jury trials. Right now, petty misdemeanor offenses, you are not entitled to a jury trial. You are entitled to just a judge trial. So I'd ask the committee to think about the impact that this will have on our judicial system. Other significant jury trials may be delayed or congested out because the court is busy litigating excessive speeding trials. Now, I also want to emphasize, as somebody who has represented hundreds of people throughout my career for excessive speeding offenses, these cases are challengeable and they are easily challengeable. And many people take these cases to trial. The reason is that you're relying on police officer behavior, including a radar gun, a laser gun, a pacing of a vehicle to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the speed that's articulated by the statute in order to be convicted of excessive speeding. So I'm just asking the committee to be mindful of the impact on our system. There is another opportunity to, if the committee wants to increase the penalty, there is a step that's missing. You can increase the penalty to a full misdemeanor. That would elevate the penalty, but it is not as excessive as imposing a Class C felony with a mandatory prison term. Additionally, as I believe I testified on before, the sentence as outlined in the bill, it is our position that that is an illegal sentence. It mandates prison time without the possibility of probation, but imposes probation-like conditions. For example, the requirement of a driver improvement assessment or a driver education assessment. Our correctional facilities, if you are given a prison term, are not equipped and do not have the resources to provide that. So the challenge is there, and it is a built-in challenge because the sentence as we see it is illegal. So I thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I will remain available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney General with comments on Zoom? Oh, in person.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Mark Tom, Deputy Attorney General for the Department. Department provides comments for SB 97 SD2. First off, I'll let the committee know we appreciate the prior committee's amendments added to this SD2 to address a number of issues and concerns the department had. Department also has one additional amendment outlined in the testimony, specific that's regarding identification processing for driving without a valid license. Now, a similar bill last year, that was House Bill 2526, enacted 212, was passed, and it follows a similar approach to what this bill does, except that bill does not have the identification processing. Now, the amendments would essentially track that language. I understand from the public defender's testimony that there's concerns and issues that they have with the identification processing. However, I would just note to the court, the identification processing is also a tool to ensure that when we're prosecuting for a Class C felony, which is a very substantial offense, that we have the right individual that we are prosecuting. We're not just prosecuting somebody without knowing that they were the same individual that was convicted not once, not twice, but now we're on a third time for excessive speeding or driving without a license. Fingerprinting would essentially ensure that we know that that person that was in court is the same person that we are prosecuting. I would also note that some of the concerns that were addressed in the prior testimony was that I think the the driving improvement class was taken out, as well as if it is a misdemeanor, which is a possible step to take, that also still includes a jury trial. I will be here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Transportation in support.
And support, thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Law Enforcement in support. Hawaii Police Department in support. Honolulu Police Department in support. On Zoom? Okay, not present. Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in support. AAA Hawaii in support. And Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 312 relating to audible vehicle reverse warning systems requires that the use of current audible reverse warning systems, backup beepers on state and county-owned vehicles purchased on or after January 1st, 2028 with more effective broadband reversing alarms by January 1st, 2028. Vice Chair for the testimony.
Department of Transportation in support. Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Seeing none, members, any questions? Don't worry, we'll have fun in decision making. Okay, last measure before us today, SB 1667, relating to transportation, prohibits any vehicles from blocking marked crosswalks, requires a person under arrest who refuses to submit to a breath, blood, or urine test to surrender their license to a law enforcement officer, increases the duration of the suspension of a license when a person is arrested for driving under influence and refuses to submit a breath, blood, or urine test, authorizes the State Highway Safety and Modernization Council to implement an additional 25 photo red light imaging detector systems, authorizes Department of Transportation to implement an additional 25 automated speed enforcement system in school zones as designated by the State Routes to School Advisory Committee, establishes requirements for State Highway Safety and Modernization Council, requires a report to the legislature, appropriates monies. Vice Chair for testimony.
State of Hawaii Judiciary, offering comments on Zoom.
Aloha, Vice Chair, committee members. Ernest De Lima on behalf of the judiciary. We submitted written testimony on this and would stand on that testimony. I would just like to point out a few things. Primarily, the judiciary is concerned about the potential increase in workload that these additional devices would have on the court system. We are currently looking at technology solutions. However, that is going to take some time. So we appreciate the recognition of an effective date of January 1st, 2027, as noted in our testimony. We would also like the committee to consider similar language that's included in House Bill 235, which requires the Department of Transportation to seek public input from the community and the judiciary when selecting locations to expand these types of devices. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Law Enforcement in support. Department of Transportation in support.
Thank you. DOT stands in support.
Thank you.
And just making
sorry.
sorry, just to add to comment, we're happy to work with the judiciary. Very difficult for us to reach out to the public and ask if we should be enforcing speed and red light running in different areas. So I would respectfully go against what the comment was in asking for us to ask the public for support in these different areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Office of the Public Defender in opposition.
Good morning again, committee members. Haley Chang on behalf of the Office of the Public Defender. We have submitted written testimony that I think outlines our position very clearly, but I would ask the committee to be mindful of something, and it is a little bit unclear from the prior committee reports. It appears that, and in speaking with others about this bill, it appears that there's a belief that passing this, and we're specifically focused on Section 4, which increases the revocation period of people who refuse to submit to testing for DUI offenses. There seems to be a belief that this will increase the license revocation for anyone who refuses, and that is not the case. This section is limited to 291E65, which addresses and is a provision of 291E64, which is just for drivers under the age of 21. So we're really talking about any drivers under the age of 21 who are being stopped for any measurable amount of alcohol. And if they refuse, it is going to increase their license revocation to 3 years. I highlight that because the current provisions under 291E64 is if you are convicted of that offense for any measurable amount of alcohol, it's a 180-day license suspension if you are under the age of 18. If you are 18 through 20, it's a 180-day suspension with the option for a restricted license after 30 days in order for you to drive to and from work. The bill was written that way because I believe the bill recognizes the significance and vulnerability of this age group. The ages of late teenage up until 20, you are looking for possibly your first job. You are furthering your education. We are hoping that these individuals are going to become productive, contributing members of our community. Giving them a 3-year license revocation for refusing to submit to testing for an offense that tracks any measurable amount of alcohol is overly punitive. That is the position of the Office of the Public Defender. Additionally, it is a penalty that is stiffer than adults who refuse. The current revocation for adults is 2 years. And you have the option to install an interlock ignition device that could reduce your revocation to 1 year. So I just want to highlight that because I think there's some confusion about how far-reaching this bill is. It is targeting a very small portion of the population, which is really what we're seeing is 17 through 20 years old. It does not impact drivers 21 and older who will refuse. Additionally, just on behalf of the public defenders, we probably represent the majority of people with driving-related offenses in the state of Hawaii. And we can tell you that there is a shift towards trying to relicense these individuals and help them get their driver's license back. Not having a driver's license, I can tell you, absolutely is one of the hugest burdens on the judicial system. We have created specialty courts and diversion courts to help these individuals get their license back because the impact on our community is that these people are not able to be productive, contributing members unless they have an alternate method of transportation, which often they will not have. As you know, the bus system is not always reliable. Certain jobs will require that you have a license. And for an age range where it honestly just may be a young mistake, we do understand the need for penalties, but we believe that this is overly punitive, and I do not believe will have the impacts that the committee or those who introduced this bill have anticipated. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I will remain available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley.
MAD Hawaii in support. Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in support. Hawaii Bicycling League in support. Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Abby Seitz with Hawaii Appleseed. We are in support of this bill as it includes a number of provisions to address particularly pedestrian safety challenges in Hawaii. But we would like to echo just some of the concerns that have been raised both by the judiciary as well as the public defender's office, particularly in particular around the punitive measures included in this bill's with a particular focus on the steep fines as well as the increased revocation periods. So we include a number of suggested amendments to address those concerns. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Opportunity.
We have Frank Schultz, individual in support. Is there anyone else in person or on Zoom who'd like to testify?
Seeing none. Members, any questions? All right, seeing none, we're going to recess. Reconvening the 9 a.m. Committee on Transportation for decision-making. Thank you, folks, for your testimony this morning, and if you folks will go bill by bill, I will explain what's happening. So, starting with our first bill, SB 1402 relating to vessels and state commercial harbors. Members, I'd like to adopt an HD1, and for this measure, we're going to affect the effective date to July 1st, 2025. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Oh, sorry. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1402 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cochran excused. Representative Evslin?
Aye.
Representative Kitagawa?
Aye.
Representative La Chica?
Aye.
Representative Miyake?
Aye.
Representative Muraoka? Representative Perrick? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. All right, members, let's move on to the next measure before us, SB 1473, relating to Central Services Assessment. Members will adopt an HD1, and I'd like to defect the effective date to July 1st, 3000. And I'd also like to note in the committee report the Department of Transportation testimony for Finance Committee consideration on the numbers that have been floated before us. And just to double check, we're going to blank any appropriation amounts that we have left in the bill, if not. Seeing that, members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Voting on SB 1473 SD2, noting the excused absence of Representative Cochran for the remainder of the measures on this agenda. Are there any representatives voting no or with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Members, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 321, relating to transportation. I'd like to adopt an HD1. On this measure, we're going to defect the effective date to July 1st, 3000. And I do want to note, I think that there was testimony raised that this is a land grab, but I definitely don't think the way that the bill is written is that. I think what's happening, especially in communities on Hawaii Island, but across the state, that you have property that has not been maintained appropriately and was not technically conveyed to the proper county authority. And I think this is our attempt to, one, make sure we can take care of roadways specifically for our neighborhoods, but also to make sure that we can prevent just mass overgrowth from under-managed vegetation. So I think this is a good bill, and I'd like to move forward with that. So just to double check, HD1, defect effective date July 1st, 3000. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on voting on SB 321 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any representatives voting no? Any with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Members, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 419, relating to insurance. Members, on this one, let's adopt an HD1, and I'd like to defect the effective date July 1st, 3000. And members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Voting on SB 419 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any noes? Any reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Members, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 1009, relating to parking. Members, I'd like to adopt an HD1. We'll make some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We will defect the effective date July 1st, 3000. And I do want to note in the committee report the line of questioning that was mentioned by Rep. La Chica and I, which I think I thought was good, that Department of DAGS has clarified that in the case, should the bill become law, they're not looking to ticket folks that would park in an inoperable EV stall. But I think we've seen it across the state. Really, largely the concern is especially people parking in disabled parking spots. So I appreciate the intent with the measure and wanting to move the bill forward for consideration. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1009 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any noes? Any reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Members, moving on to our next bill before us, SB 1120 relating to transportation. Members, if you will indulge me. So on this measure before us is a similar House measure that we considered that didn't move from the next committee. I think that there is good intent for the measure, but I think every concern that's been raised is valid. So what I do want to note is that, one, I want to adopt an HD1. We're going to affect the effective date July 1st, 3000. We're going to make technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. And then I would like to make an addition into the bill that upon enactment, that there be a 1-year deferred implementation date, that upon the deferred implementation date, the Department of Transportation is authorized to conduct their own internal feasibility study on potential fiscal impacts that would then be due to the legislature 60 days before the prior convening of the legislative session. And I do want to note in the committee report the same thing I noted in the original bill, that as we make these advancements towards clean fuel standards and whatnot, there needs to be a way that across the board, nobody gets left behind. And in tune, don't want to necessarily also burden any taxpayer unfairly. And we're going to blank all the dollar amounts, and I said defective date, right? Okay, and effective date to July 1st, 3000. Okay, so with that, members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1120 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Are there any noes? Okay. Representatives Muraoka and Purick voting no. Are there any reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, members, let's move on to the next measure before us, SB 21 relating to water carriers. Members, we'll adopt the HD1. We'll defect the effective date July 1st, 3000. I'd also like to add some cleanup language into the bill. In the bill, we're going to insert that the water carrier inflationary cost index should be an automatic adjustment mechanism, shall be applied annually, irrespective of whether the adjustment reflects a positive or negative percentage change. Be subject to maximum adjustment limit of plus or minus 5% per year. Operate on a recurring 3-year cycle wherein the adjustment is applied annually in the first and second years, followed by a mandatory general rate case filing in the third year. Technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. I think with the language that the rate filing is filed in the third year allows the continued discussion that we can always revisit this measure. So with that, members, questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay. Voting on SB 21 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Are there any members voting no? Or with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Members, moving on to our next measure before us, SB 117 relating to transportation. If you folks would be okay with it, I would like to defer decision-making to March 13th for our 9 o'clock agenda here in Conference Room 430. I think there are some great parts in the bill and trying to confine it to make sure we can move it forward in its best way possible. So we already filed the hearing notice for March 13th, the 9 a.m. hearing. We will consider this bill at that same agenda just for decision-making. No testimony will be accepted. Okay, members, we went to our next measure before us, SB 1008 relating to parking. I'd like to adopt an HD1, and then I just want to make this just for note. On page 2, line 18 to page 3 and line 9, in accordance with our drafting, we're going to reuse a section number while repealing its contents and replacing it with new language. We don't do that. So as a tech amendment in section 291-58, the HRS will be repealed in its entirety and the proposed language will be inserted into part 3 of chapter 291 as a new section, just so you folks know what we're doing. And with that, we're going to do tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and we're going to defect the effective date July 1st, 3000. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Voting on SB 1008, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Are there any members voting no? Any with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Members, next bill, SB 97, relating to motor vehicles. If you, again, would indulge me, I have several amendments to make. So in we're going to adopt the HD1. We're going to insert and amend language around the language of penalties. That we're going to insert language relating to penalties to automated speed enforcement systems as well, to do some cleanup language. I also want to note, sorry, for the languages around penalties to the speed and red light systems. For the speed systems, any summons or citations issued or convictions arising under this chapter shall not be recorded on an individual's traffic abstract and shall not be considered for the purposes of determining motor vehicle insurance coverage. I think this is a fair compromise. I don't want folks to be inundated and not be able to have that be affected. Also, that the summons or citation shall be sent via first-class mail and postmarked no later than 10 calendar days following the date of the violation. If the 10th day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or state-recognized holiday, the deadline shall be extended to next business day. To continue, that the registered owner of the motor vehicle shall be identified based on the motor vehicle license plate and corresponding records maintained by vehicle licensing divisions. Then we're going to amend Section 286-136 Hawaii revised statutes, adding a new subsection B to read as the following with the appropriate relettering of subsequent subsections. On Section B, any person who violates 286-102, 286-122, 286-130, 286-131, 286-132, 286-133, or 286-134, and is convicted, granted, or deferred acceptance of a guilty or non-conterred plea, receives a conditional discharge for the offense, shall be required by the court to report to the appropriate police department, sheriff's office, or governmental agency for identification processing, and such processing shall include fingerprinting, photographing, and photographing as provided in Section 84.6-2.5b if the individual has not previously undergone identification processing for the offense. We're also making technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. And for members on this bill, I'm going to adopt an effective date July 1st, 2025. With that, questions, comments, or concerns? I do want to make a comment. I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding that is being floated around some of the measures we're proposing with our speed enforcement systems and our red light camera systems. And I want the committee to know and the public to know that these measures are not to be used for anything in regards to surveillance or the picture taking or some of the testimony that's come out in the Senate. So I just want the public to understand we are not photographing your face. And I want that to be clear. And the department has reaffirmed that position, that this is not to be used in any case of that. So with that, members, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Rep. Pierrick. Thank you, Rep.
I'm going to go WR, just noting the concerns of the public defender on the Class C felony.
Noted. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Comments or concerns? Okay, with that, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Voting on SB 97, SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Representative Perrick voting no. Are there any other noes? Representative Grandinetti with reservations. Any other reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And before I move on to the next measure, I always appreciate Haley and the Office of the Public Defender coming before us. And I appreciate that. SB 312 relating to audible vehicle reverse warning systems. Members, so we're going to adopt an HD1 on this one. If you folks would mind, I'm going to delete Section 1. And we're going to defect the effective date, July 1st, 3000. I'm also going to add language that the Department of Transportation may grant exemptions for the requirement for broadband warning systems in cases where systems are unavailable. Prior to granting the exemption, the applicant must demonstrate a good faith effort to implement the broadband warning system, and the Director of Transportation shall establish the criteria to determine what constitutes a good faith effort. The Department of Transportation shall maintain a continuously updated record of all vehicles granted exemptions due to the unavailability of the broadband warning systems, and this list of exempted vehicles shall be made publicly available, accessible, and updated on a biannual basis. Reporting detailing these exemptions shall be submitted to the legislature 30 days prior to the convening of each session and 60 days following its conclusion. And we will make tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 312, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any members voting no or with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And members, last measure, SB 1667, relating to transportation. If you folks don't mind, I would like to defer decision-making as well on this measure to March 13th for a 9 o'clock agenda in conference room 430. Again, same bill, just need to work on some things. And with that, I will see you folks on Thursday. Hearing adjourned.